Okay, this one is called Pram. The lady at the supermarket was the fifth person to look at him with questioning eyes. He had a pushchair, but no child with him. She was confused, but then, so was he. When he and his ex-girlfriend parted ways, she made it clear that she expected him to be a father to the child they had welcomed only 3 months prior. She told him that he could leave her, but he was not to leave their daughter. That she didn't want her baby to grow up unsure of what a man was supposed to be. She didn't want their little girl to date endless men in search of the father she didn't know. He was outraged. He had no intention of leaving his daughter. He told her he wished he could bear the pain of staying, just so he could stay with his baby girl. That he hated that she got to keep their child by default, even though she was at fault. He wanted her 50% of the time, or at least every weekend. She agreed to the weekends. And so every Friday, for the next 2 years, he collected his daughter in the afternoon and returned her to her mother on a Sunday evening. When he arrived at the flat that Friday, there was a man there, Dean. He'd heard of Dean. His ex-girlfriend had told him that things were getting serious with Dean, that Dean was moving in. He'd made it clear that he expected to be given the space to continue to be the father he had been to the child that they had welcomed 2 years prior. And she'd agreed. But this was the first time he was meeting Dean, and it was clear that Dean did not agree. Dean told him that he wouldn't be taking his daughter that afternoon because he'd made plans for the family that weekend. He told Dean he got it wrong. And then he looked at his ex, who was stood behind Dean with their daughter in her arms. He told her to put Dean straight before he did. Well, she bowed her head and said it was true, that his baby girl would not be going with him that Friday afternoon, but he could come and get her the following weekend. And then Dean said, maybe. He shook his head. Then he shouted. Then he swung his fist. Dean was strong, but he was desperate. She's mine. She's mine. She's mine. As he got louder, Dean made him get smaller. And then his baby, she began to cry, scream, wail, Daddy, stop. You're hurting, Daddy. Daddy, hurting. Her little voice, her obvious distress hurt more than the punches Dean was landing, so he stopped fighting. So did Dean. He was on the floor now, looking up at his daughter, a scrunched up mess in her mother's arms. He reached out to her, told her he was sorry, told her Daddy loved her, Daddy wanted her, come to Daddy. Dean slammed the door. He stayed on the floor for 5 minutes. He was bleeding. He was bruised. He was broken. And now he was in the supermarket. He needed antiseptic. He needed bandages, but he couldn't find them. He couldn't see anyone that could help him find what he was looking for. He couldn't even find the exit. So he just stood there, pink pushchair at his feet, shedding tears in the baby aisle. Thank you.